Welcome back to Level 6 Math. I'm Mr. C with our Saxon Math Lesson 56. Now this is just an extension of our last activity. So we did Common Denominators Part 1 in Lesson 55. Now we're doing Part 2. And all we're going to do on this one is, rather than having to change one of the fractions, today we're going to have to change both of the fractions to find a common denominator. Okay? So in 55, we added and subtracted fractions that didn't have common denominators by renaming one of the fractions in order to add or subtract. So, for example, Tony and Catherine ordered a pineapple pizza. Tony ate half and Catherine ate a third. What fraction of the pizza did Tony and Catherine eat? This isn't what we did last time because a third and a half, 2 can't go into 3 and 3 can't go into 2. So this is a new kind of problem that we're dealing with this week. We're going to rewrite that or show it like 1/2 and 1/3. We're going to see that we can't add the fractions 1/2 and 1/3 by simply counting the number of parts, because the parts aren't the same. The denominators are different. So we need to find a common denominator. That's the problem here. And this is a really common thing in working with fractions in adding and subtracting. We have to have that common denominator. So renaming 1/2 as 2/4, that's what we did in our last lesson. That's not going to work here because 2/4 isn't the same as a fourth, is not the same as a third as far as denominators. We need to have the same denominator. So in 2/4 and 1/3, the parts are still different sizes. So we had to figure out how can we make these have the same denominator. That's the problem that we're facing today. And honestly, most of the time that you're adding and subtracting fractions, this is going to be a problem because they're not going to have the same denominators. So we have to rename both of the fractions in order to get the parts. So we're just going to come up with equivalent fractions for both of the fractions, and then we can be able to add and subtract. All right? So the least common multiple, that's what we're looking for here first, of 2 and 3 is 6. And we know that because 2 times 3 is 6. So we've practiced finding least common multiples before. Usually, the easiest way to do that is simply to multiply the two numbers, and that gives you your least common multiple. Now, that's not always the case, but it usually is. And so we're pretty safe doing that most of the time. So we're going to hear, if our common denominator is 6, we're going to change 1/2 to 3/6 by multiplying by 3/3, right? So 1/2 times 3/3 is 3/6. 1/3 will go into 6 by multiplying 3 times 2. So we're going to multiply this one by 2/2. And that gets us 2/6. So now we have 3/6 and 2/6. 1/2 is equal to 3/6, and 1/3 is equal to 2/6. So it works. Now we have common denominators. So we can take, they just want us to add it up. So we're going to take our common denominators. We're going to get the 6. So first we'll get 3/6, then we'll add 2/6 to it. 3 plus 2, of course, is 5. So our answer is going to be 5/6. So we're just going to rename each of the fractions first, and then we can add or subtract depending on what kind of problem we have. All right, let's try it here with Risa. Cool name, Risa. Risa saw that she had 3/4 of a carton of 12 eggs. She used 2/3 of the whole carton to make a batch of French toast for the family. That was nice of her. What fraction of the egg carton was not used? So we're going to look at 3/4 and 2/3, right? And it's 2/3 of 12, 3/4 of 12. Now, we need to find a common denominator, so we're going to take the 4 and the 3, and if we multiply those, we get 12, so we know that 12 is going to work. Sometimes I think, what's half of 12? 6. Can 4 go into 6? No. So we're going to stick with that 12 as our common denominator. So to change 3/4 to something 12ths, we have to multiply 4 by 3, so it's going to be 3/3. So 3 times 3 is 9. So 9/12, or 9 of the 12 eggs. And then 2/3, 3 times 4 equals 12, so it's going to be 4/4. 2 times 4 is 8. So when we rename these, we get 9/12 minus 8/12. So we had 9 eggs. We used 8 of the eggs. How many eggs are we going to have left? 1 of the 12 eggs. 1/12. This seems complicated, I know. It's just going to take practice. Once you've gotten used to finding common denominators, this is so easy. And you will have this come up on all your end of the year testing. They're going to represent it this way. They're also going to have, like you say, greater than or less than. We're going to do that here in a minute. So this is a really important concept to learn for testing purposes. Do we usually do problems where we say, I had 3/4 of a carton? No, we usually say, I had 12 eggs, or I had 3/4 is 9. I had 9 eggs. I used 8 eggs. How many do I have left? 1 egg. So we don't usually, this is a kind of a silly word problem. We're not going to talk about it in this way in the real world. But we do need, the concept is important. Being able to find a common denominator. We do change fractions all the time in the real world. So I just don't love the word problems they use for this. We can check our reasonableness by thinking about the eggs. We did that already. 3/4 of 12 is 9. And then 2/3 is 8. We subtract 8 from 9, and that's 1. Okay. Renaming one or more fractions can also help us compare. Now, this is something that you'll see on testing all the time. And so this is good to practice. And honestly, this is really a helpful exercise just in thinking, what's bigger, 4/5 or 5/6 or something like that. So it's good to practice comparing fractions that don't have common denominators. This makes it so you know the answer definitively. You don't have to guess. Sometimes you can guess and you're going to be pretty close, but this way you'll know for sure. So to do this, to compare fractions with that have common denominators, we simply compare the numerators. 4 is less than 5, we know that. But if the denominators are not the same, we can't just look at the numerators. It won't work, okay? So if we compare, so they say, what do? We can rename one or both of the fractions. Here we only have to rename one of the fractions because 2 can go into 8. So we're just going to have to rename this fraction so that it has a common denominator with 8. To change a 2 to 8, we have to multiply it by 4. 4/4 times 1/2 is going to be 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So we get 4/8. And what's bigger, 4/8 or 3/8? Well, 4/8 is, of course. Okay, so we're just going to change that. Multiplying 1/2 by 4/4, we get 4/8. Then we compare it. 4/8 is greater than 3/8. So it's easy when you only have to do one. But as we just practiced today, we can do it by finding a common denominator by changing both of the fractions too. So let's go ahead and try that. All right, so here we have 2/3. Is that greater or less than 3/4? Now if we just think about it, you can visualize, is 2/3 bigger than 3/4? No, 3/4 is bigger. You know probably just by drawing it or having that picture in your head. But to get a true comparison, we need to change these denominators to be the same. Now 3 times 4 is 12, so we know a common denominator is going to be 12. Now to figure if that's the least common denominator, we can think, are there other factors that are smaller? Well, there aren't. We could think 6, they don't both go into 6. 4 times 2 is 8, 3 can't go into 8, so it's going to be 12. All right, so we're going to take 2/3 times 4/4 equal 8/12. And 3/4 times 3/3 equals 9/12. And the way we got that 4/4 and 3/3 is 3 times 4 equals 12. So we know we're going to have to multiply by 4/4. And 4 times 3 is 12, so we're going to have to multiply this one by 3/3. So now we can just compare what's bigger, 8/12 or 9/12. Well, 9, because the denominator is the same, we just look at the numerator, and 9 is greater than 8. So 3/4 is greater than 2/3. That's it. Okay, use the answer in example 4 to arrange these fractions in order from least to greatest. So we can already do that because we know that 1/2 is the same as 2/4, so that's less than 3/4. And we know that 2/3 is less than 3/4, so we go 1/2, 2/3, 3/4. So pretty cool that we can do that now. That's all you're going to practice today, is finding that common denominator by changing those fractions, by finding the least common denominator, and then you can compare which one's greater or less than. So this one is a tricky assignment. It's going to take some practice. We're going to review it for the rest of the year. This is something we'll come back to over and over and over again because it's really good to be able to do this. So good luck.